while I just wait for people to join, this is going to be a video just discussing what I've gathered from being on the ground in on Grenfell Tower every day except today, actually, since this fire happened, and speaking to eyewitnesses, not just the normal volunteers who have, you know, been on the ground helping, and that's absolutely fantastic, but to those people in charities, activists who gained access into these centres for victims from the very first few hours of the morning. So I'm just going to wait for everyone to come in. Just let me caveat with the fact that I was going to write this all down, but I am flying later on, later today, and I don't have time to write it, but I'm going to do this live video to discuss this. I want to start by saying that there is some sort of sensitivity about the reporting of numbers right now, and I want to separate the extent to which journalists like myself, if they're as a news reporter on the ground, how they need to deal with accurate reporting versus what journalism actually is on the ground. But we have a situation at the moment where there is a discrepancy, and we need to try and analyse and investigate what that is. I've written down a few things I want to say, so maybe hopefully it's coherent. But this fire happened at 1 o'clock in the morning. I found out about it about 1:10 in the morning via text message, and since that time I've spoken to people on the ground who were there from 1 AM and 1:30 AM and stayed throughout the night until the morning around 9 AM. And of course we've heard from other prominent activists who also happen to live in the area and who witnessed that. One person I spoke to said that they were there from 1 o'clock, and at the height of this cordon that the police had made for victims, for survivors to be taken, she cannot remember seeing more than 100 people there. So that's from the very initial hours while the fire was still taking place. And then we have what I was hearing after that, so from about 9 AM, 10 AM, where experts and people from charities had gotten to the ground, and these weren't the ordinary citizens that were rushing there and were outside of the centre doors and weren't getting access. These are speaking to people who have gone inside the centres at that time because they were the first responders of the community, and hearing reports that in the Rugby Portobello Centre, we're talking at about 10 AM, there was a maximum of 40 people there, that at midday there was nobody, no survivors in the Westway Centre, and other details like that, that there was, by the afternoon 2 PM, only 9 people in the church, nobody at Westway. I gained access inside the Rugby Portobello Centre at about 4 PM, if I remember correctly. I counted 25 people in there. Some clearly told me that they were the family members who had come from other areas to sit with people from that block. I did hear at that time, so we're talking about 4 or 5 PM on the afternoon of the first day, that some people had been sent to hotels, and these were actual survivors telling me this. so that was the information we were getting that I'm now sitting down talking to you about in those first few hours and the first day. What I've been told by these people who had access inside the centres, the first hours and day of this fire, is that the council staff on that first few hours, being housing staff, sat on their laptop, refused to speak to residents, didn't take a proactive approach into housing them, and that it was left to the volunteers on the ground. So we were hearing this right from the beginning, and of course, as I've said in my previous posts, you know, I've been a journalist for 10 years, but that actually I felt that this was one of those occasions where you need to go on the ground and you need to really absorb what's happening, go in, help, listen to what's being said, and try to understand what the community is saying, but also to be witness. So we were picking up on that, and we were looking at how things were developing from that very first hour. And what's developed until then, I feel that there is at least enough journalistic credibility. I'm sorry it got cut off. I hope that people are rejoining me. The reason that it might get cut off is because I haven't put my mobile on to aeroplane mode, because I'm getting calls from people on the ground there. It got cut off there because a psychologist I'm trying to source for one of the family members has just called me back to say she can go and assist them. I forgot what I was saying or where I was up to in the story, in this kind of narrative that I was saying. Can you remind me? Yes, I think I was saying that, yes, at this moment now, really looking objectively at the information, I think there is enough journalistic credibility and credence to what we have gathered to be able to put these questions forward, and I don't think they're being put forward adequately. So I've explained that how these situations usually unfold for a journalist that's on the ground. You go onto the ground and you start gathering information, and you use that information that you're getting from eyewitnesses and you tally it up with what is being said officially, and from the fire services, from the police, from the council and all related authorities. And it would be, I believe, actually incompetent as somebody in the media to start saying with any certainty things that aren't in line with the official line in those initial hours, and as things develop and as you're trying to familiarise yourself with an event. Of course you can, where you feel there's credibility, allude to things, but for example, of course, not in headlines or whatnot. So we've been monitoring, and what happened on the second day was that I was called in to go inside the Westway Centre, where we were told in the media and by the council and basically by most official channels that that is where the victims are now housed. And I'd been asked to go and translate for a Farsi speaking family, and I don't want to say too much about that particular circumstance because it's actually that's a real family, and they're going through something right now that I'm still trying to help coordinate, so it's not right to speak on the specifics, but I want to say some things about me going into that centre. There was 12 people in that centre. There was 12 survivors in that centre. I counted them. Inside, on the beds were empty. There was 2 families and 2 individuals, and I counted 12 people. There were some people who were clearly survivors, again about a dozen, in the foyer outside, picking up, toilet towels and clothes and this, that and the other. What so happened that while I was there is that Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, had come in to visit and had a brief conversation with the medical volunteers that were there, and I so happened to have been counted as one of those, because I was holding the fort until a mental health professional with the right language skills was to arrive. And Sadiq Khan, you know, we said, well, there's not a lot of people here. And again, you know, it's a bit of a, I wasn't there as a journalist. I hadn't identified as a journalist, so to an extent I feel that it's not correct to go into the full details. But as an eyewitness, I can say that Sadiq Khan alluded to the fact that, well, most of these families have now been are now with friends and relatives and family members, and so it's hard to get the message of where the help is available to them. And so then I took that on board. But I saw something else in the time that I was in the Westway Centre. This is the official place where these survivors are supposed to go, not only shocked by the lack of people there, but also shocked by what I witnessed by the council. There were 4 members of council staff in blue vis jackets with Roy Borough of Kensington Chelsea written on the back, and they were sitting behind, if I'm not mistaken, two twos behind a desk. And I witnessed myself, and I will speak specifically to one incident, but I witnessed more than one incident. But 2 men from outside of London came into the Westway Centre, and at that time, to get into the Westway Centre, the 2 policemen at the top were hardly letting anyone in. I had to wait about 20 minutes to be let in, to then go and talk to the Red Cross, who then bounced me to the council, to one member of council, I don't know doing what, who had no clue what was going on, who bounced me back to the Red Cross, who in the end just said, just go inside, nobody knows what's going on, just go and see if you can find this family. So it's not like anybody, member of the public, could walk in. Obviously these people had gone to the police, identified themselves as family members, had gone to the Red Cross and had come inside. I heard them say as they walked in specifically that they'd been told to come here to look at a list, and they were trying to find out what had happened to their whole family on the 17th floor. Everybody in that hall, the medical, small group of medical volunteers and the 4 people from the council heard what these 2 people said, and the council staff did not even really look up from their chairs. They did not get up to greet anybody that walked into that hall. They did not pay any attention to me or anybody else that walked in, and they paid no attention to those relatives when they walked in. Everybody stood around aimlessly for a few minutes, and in the end it was a volunteer nurse that walked up to them, tried to figure out what was going on, and wrote their names down on a scrap piece of paper. And I witnessed that, and I put it in my pocket with the rest of the things that I'd been hearing up until that point. And I left, and I walked around a bit more, and I looked for other people from the council, and they were nowhere to be seen. And by this point, so this is in the late afternoon on the 2nd day, I realised that there is obviously a growing amount of eyewitness evidence, not only that I'm hearing from other people, and everything I'm telling you, I'm saying when someone saw this amount of numbers here or there, I'm not going far out from my own. So these are people I know directly, these are people that I trust as sources directly, and who are not, as I said, just an average person who had just come down with some goods to help. No, these are people with expertise in the area who were on the inside. So a story was developing, which was that there are 2 layers. There was this community rushing, Londoners rushing to give goods, and that there was so much goods on the ground now that there was this community-led initiative to box up these goods. was happening out on the streets. And that there was this idea then that behind closed doors, where the victims are, there's obviously some sort of coordinated, very serious, very organised effort, but that actually for us who had gained access to that, we weren't actually seeing that behind closed doors. And, you know, even still at that time, I thought, well, probably they've all been housed and they're all with friends and family, taking into consideration what Sadiq Khan had said and this, that and the other. But I think that at this point, it is very clear that there are very serious questions. There is no council management of this situation. We have to look at what's happening on the ground. We've had a group of about, I thought, if I'm not mistaken, about 100 relatives and family members going to the town hall, demanding answers because they're not being communicated with. We've got multiple cases, including what I've witnessed myself, of the very minimal council staff inside these centres ignoring the victims and survivors that are inside. Nobody has seen a lot of survivors in these centres. Look, 10 a.m, a maximum of 40 people in the Rugby Portobello Centre, as given to me by somebody I know, who I trust, who was inside. No one at Westway at 12 p.m. I witnessed myself only 25 people in the rugby centre about 4 o'clock on the first day. At that point, again, somebody I know and who I trust and who walked from where I was standing to the church and then walked back to tell me, said 9 people in the church at that time. And inside of the Westway Centre on Thursday, only 12 people. So obviously we're not saying anything definitive. What we're saying is that it's very clear from the information that the people that were on the ground, from experts, charities helping people house. And another thing that's very important to say is that in those initial hours, people were being reluctant to be sent anywhere because they felt, even in those first hours after surviving that fire, when the council was saying, let us send you somewhere, they actually felt that they were being sent out of the borough, never to return. That's the level of mistrust there was. So this has been developing. So that's in terms of that. But today, in the last few hours, and the thing that's just made me really think that it's important to talk about this, and actually I wish I had time to come and write, to have compiled something very succinct and maybe just done a very succinct video or a succinct post, but unfortunately I don't have any way of just giving this block of half an hour or so just to put out this information and give it to other people. I'm travelling in a few hours, so I'm not going to be in the UK, for other people to spread this information. Because the other thing that's become the question I had, which I was doubting by day 2, for me is now become something that journalistically there is enough here now for these questions to be asked, and they're not being asked. My analysis, if I was going to go, would say that I'm pretty certain that this evaluation is correct, but as I said, objectively and journalistically, you must of course caveat that with the fact that there is not, the proof will be in the weeks and months when these numbers come out. But again today, we've heard in the last few hours, the council has come to the centres such as the Al-Manar Mosque and said they're taking over. But again, whilst this is happening, I've got in the last hour again a call from the Westway Centre, and I can't get into the details because, as I said, there are families that need to be informed of situations, there are families that are really in need, but there are still only about 12 people inside the Westway Centre, and there are volunteers inside at this point, 4 days on, sourcing translators, psychologists, and people to help, even being told they need people to come down and help the police, because there is an absolute lack of any form of council coordination to go and help these victims, to go and tell them about the fate of their loved ones. This is happening now. It's not. This is. You know. It's. It would be actually. You know, there's all this conversation about, and this is what I wanted to come and talk about when we look at something objective, from a media perspective, when you're looking at something and you're going on the ground and you're trying to look at the information coming out and to put a picture together as, what is the word, as, I don't know, unprofessional, there's a word I'm looking for, I'll think about, I'll figure it out, pardon me, I am fasting, as it would be wrong to start reporting on numbers before there's enough of information. I think that has now tipped. It is now wrong not to be reporting and talking about this very clear information that is coming out from the ground. Now, one of the problems is, of course, is that there is, what do you do when the media is used to falling back on these official figures and an official response and what this person is saying and what that person is saying? What do you do in a catastrophe like this that has come about from the complete breakdown of any local and national government management of a situation? There is a widening gulf and gap between what is actually happening. This is a question now of, are the authorities actually managing the situation, or are they continuing to fail? How can you question that if you are just relying on what the authorities are saying? And every time the people on the ground are trying to say to you, look, this is what's happening around us, you're going to jump in and say, oh yes, but the number is only 30. This is actually the wrong thing to do at this moment, because journalistically and objectively, if you are on the ground doing your job, serious questions need to now be asked. What is happening is that it's happening far too slowly for the people on the ground. What I've come to conclude today, by what I've done by speaking again to charities and people that are on the inside, and again from my own experience of being called and asked to go and help, is that actually there, you know, even for us, for journalists that are community journalists, you know, we've placed that. I mean, I could be not a community journalist if I wanted, but I said that I'm going to go down and I'm going to be community led on this, and I'm not going to film, and I'm not going to. The charities who are working on, even for our point, where we believed that there must be a level of coordination beyond us sorting this down. No, we are not seeing any evidence of that. We're not actually seeing any evidence of any form of official coordination beyond the semi-official coordination of volunteers. They're volunteers who happen to be charities, volunteers who happen to be medical staff, but they are all on a volunteer basis. It seems the evidence is suggesting that the height of coordinating right now, inside the centres, behind the closed doors, where there's no media aren't being allowed in, is that it's still a semi-official volunteer service. There is no official coordination, there is no official management. And we're being told there's survivors in these centres. There are no survivors in these centres. I'm telling you, I've been to the mosque every day. There are no people at the church. There are no people at Portobello Rugby Centre. There are no people at Al-Manar Mosque. There are about a dozen people in Westway. If it is true that the rest of them have been rehoused, and we know there, of course, I heard of some people being rehoused, and we've seen on social media being rehoused, but there seems to be an absolute vacuum of evidence that there's been a mass amount of people rehoused. There is no hotel that has 60 families in this hotel. We're being told that these people have just gone to friends and families' houses. We are not. They're sticking. This is. Let me just be very, 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 very clear. This is nothing about conspiracy theories. There's nothing about anything. This is. I studied journalism for 4 years. I've been working in the media for 10 years. This is about evidence on the ground and what we're hearing. There has to be questions about why there is absolutely no official response. There is no official response. Look what you saw on your TVs yesterday. actual victims and survivors and their families marched onto the town hall asking for somebody to come out and talk to them, and they are not being talked to. These people do not have access to the centres. These people do not have access to the town hall. These people do not have access to Theresa May. There is no access. So the point I'm doing this video, and I've been very long-winded, I apologise, but because I'm going away and I'm not back for 7 days, somebody please watch this live video from beginning to end and note down everything I've said and put it down together more succinctly. The objective journalistic, and another thing I need to say is that I covered the London riots. I did the same thing in the London riots. I did not take a camera in. I did not film. I did not go in with an elitist attitude that too many journalists have. I was inside the estates. I was inside with the people. I actually stood there while I saw them riot and show anger to the police, and I also saw where the journalists were reporting that story from far away, behind police cordons, where access was limited and controlled, and they had no choice but to rely on official authority information, because they are so disconnected and distrusted within these communities that they cannot, their safety is also at risk. We saw as soon as there was a little bit of tension, those people on the ground turned on the media. I can't put that same blanket criticism on the mainstream media in this case, but it's more a reflection on the absolute tragedy that they know it is. You know, I'm not Einstein, yeah, and there are hundreds of journalists in this country far more experienced than me. There is no way that they're not looking at this and not knowing what has happened, and they are tempering and timing their coverage in a way that doesn't have the community's interests at heart. There has to be pressure maintained for these questions to be asked, and the question, the serious, objective, journalistic question at this point, having gathered the information we have in the last 4 days, is that why are we being told 30? Why is any attempt by people on the ground to suggest, not to confirm, not to do anything more than to relay the realities on the ground, why is that being stopped every single time with reporters saying, but we should just say that the official death count is 30? It could be that the media are also just getting the tone wrong, the same way that they got the tone, the council got the tone wrong and the Tories got the tone wrong, and that people don't understand. It could just be that, but I want to make a point beyond that, that there's people on the ground. I've been on the ground. There are people on the ground telling us a story. It's not one person or two people, it's thousands and thousands of people. Thousands of people on the ground are saying the same thing. This cannot be ignored. Okay, we're not saying somebody said, somebody said, somebody said, somebody said, and that's why I'm doing this video now, is that I'm saying that I've been on the ground, I'm relaying to you the things I've seen myself, and as a journalist of 10 years have spoken to other people who are credible, who I know myself. There is no chain of narrations here. It is I have seen myself, or a credible source I trust has told me. And whilst we of course hope that there are more families that have been housed and more families that are with relatives and friends and families, we cannot deny what we are seeing, and we need, when people are saying they want questions answered, they want these questions answered. They're saying that if in the hours after this fire, we are being told there was only 40 people in the rugby centre, and by later on that day only 12 people in the Westway Centre, and only 9 people in the church, and only 25 people in the rugby centre. And after that we thought, well, the council must have acted quickly and rehoused them. But from that point on, we have seen everybody tell us that there's been absolutely no communication from the council. We need to know. People on the ground, these family members, they need to know. They need to know what is going on. They need more information. They are not stupid. People are not stupid just because they live on a social housing estate, just because they are immigrants or they are Muslims or they are black. They are not stupid. They do not need you to keep telling them that they need to wait for their family, who they know was on the 17th floor. Stop. You know, it's not the point is, it's not the council that are telling them you need to wait. Oh, look, let me take you to this room. This is really bad. We're really sorry. We don't know what's happened to your family members. We haven't been able to identify them on this list of people we've rehoused. And I'm really sorry, but we need to wait for dental records. We need, what we're trying to now express, and we need people to put pressure on, is to say this process that is, you know, that everyone assumes is happening, is not happening. That is what people on the ground and us who have been working there have been saying and seeing. If there is any form of official coordination that is happening, we are not seeing it. And what might be happening that we're saying, oh, this might be happening, but we're not seeing it, it's just not enough. People were coming in looking for a list in front of my own eyes, and there's no list. And then we're hearing, you're seeing on the mainstream media, if you're anywhere in the UK and you saw on the news, on Sky News or BBC, the live footage where people were chanting outside the town hall, where is the list? This is the list they're talking about. They're saying that the council must have a list of the people registered to live in that house. Stop saying, oh, we don't know if they were in, or we don't know if they were in there, or we don't know if they were out, or we don't know if they were at the mosque. Well, we're not stupid, we know that. We're saying, do you have a list of who's registered in that house? You must have a list of people that have been housed. You must have a list of the people that are in the centres. So when family members are coming, you must be able to take them with sensitivity into a private place and say to them, I'm sorry, we don't know what the status of your family member is. They are not at the hospital, they are not in the centre, and they have not been rehoused. We are so sorry. Can we give you grief counselling while you wait? The firefighters are doing everything they can. People are assuming this conversation is happening. This conversation is not happening as far as we can see. And if it is happening, it's happening on a scale that's not acceptable, because we are going on the ground and every single day we are having families telling us this isn't happening. So this is really, really important. This isn't about, it's not about this kind of coverage to say, to in some sort of subconscious way imply that people on the ground there are so stupid that they don't realise that what they're looking at this building. It is not even infuriating. It's actually an insult to their intelligence, and it should be an insult to all of our intelligences. I'm telling you, I have seen 2 people come and look at that building on the 17th floor. Their family was on the 17th floor, and they're looking at that building, and you're telling me they're not smart enough to realise that if their family member didn't get out, they need to wait for dental records. I think they know that their family member is as burnt as that building. So it is the way that these people are being treated with contempt, and there is no official organisation, and people on the ground are saying this, and they're trying to say this very loudly, and all people's voices are being dismissed. This is including the voices of experts and journalists and academics and doctors and nurses and professionals on the ground. You can't just put everybody that is saying this into this group and then use our underlying deep-rooted subconscious and biases towards certain communities to dismiss this voice. Please, please, this is the message that needs to be spread right now. I will go as far as to say that, of course, we must wait for official numbers, but that might be, given the scale of this, weeks and months. And we cannot let the momentum of this to drop down. Everything I'm seeing on the ground and everything I have learnt in 10 years of journalism is indicating to me that this number of 150 people dead, which nobody seems to want to report in a concrete way, sounds so much more like the number of survivors than the number of dead. And I had to think long and hard before I broadcast that. but to what's happened in the last 2 hours and just speaking to people, I don't think, I actually think it is now negligence not to say that, because it's becoming clear. We're not saying we have the answers, we're saying that this is clearly showing us what questions need to be asked. This must be asked. These are the questions that must be asked. This is not about the public finding out. We're actually saying we know of a significant number of survivors, victims and families of those victims who have not been given any information. The council has to know how many people were living in that building. We're not stupid. We're not saying tell us who was exactly there at 1:10 a.m. on the morning. We need to know. We need to know. This is when I'm saying we, it's that this community needs to know the way they're being treated is absolutely. If they're, sorry if I got cut out there for a second, if there are any protests that are taking place while I'm away, please get to the ground in mass numbers peacefully to support that community, so that those protests cannot be fueled into a darker space. Really, everybody needs to be asking these questions. There was 24 floors with about 24 people living in each of those floors. That's 576 people. We are not stupid. Of course we know some of them might have been at the mosque. Of course we know some of them might have been on holiday. Of course we know that. We're not asking for something exact, but we're trying to say that if evidence on the ground is suggesting that there was only 40 people in the rugby centre, there was only 20 people at the height, I haven't heard more than 20 people at the church, I haven't heard more than 30 people at the mosque. If we're adding up that number and the number of eyewitnesses who have seen survivors doesn't go above 150, this has to mean something. The council has to take control of this situation. I have absolutely no idea why there has been such a collapse. At this moment, it is bordering. Well, we have reasons why we can analyse it, and the analysis will come. But whatever form of contempt, whatever form of overwhelming feeling the council have and authorities have, they just need to get a grip, because by them not taking control of the situation, they are leaving the burden on the people that have lost everything. This is unfair. We appreciate that this is a disaster and a travesty, and that the richest borough in the whole of the UK is a bit overwhelmed, but they need to get their act together. They need to use some of that money to get in experts to coordinate the situation, crisis management, whatever they need to do, because by us trying to excuse their behaviour, we're saying that it's okay for them to continue to be overwhelmed by this situation and leave the burden of this on the victims and those who have survived. That is grossly, grossly, grossly unfair. I think I've said everything I want. I could go on for hours. Let me just say 2 more things. I'm just looking at this list of things that I can say. I've obviously said what I've witnessed in terms of how many survivors there might be. You could do the maths, but I don't feel comfortable to put I don't, as I said, that you see information and you put it in your pocket, and you see information you put in pocket, and then you come out and you say something when you think it is got enough credibility and credence. But I will only say this. There is a number in my head that I really hope that the evidence does not go in the direction that it looks like it's going, and that I don't get to a point where I feel that there is enough credibility to say that number, but that number is in the back of my mind. I will say though is that I don't know if you heard, but these two figures, one from a credible, someone I would say is a credible source for me because it's somebody I know and I've spoken to directly. The other one is someone we've heard from in the media, but we heard on the media a prominent grime artist telling us that a fireman on the ground told him that they have taken over 200 dead bodies out of that building. I don't know why we can't say this without being accused of being conspiracy theorists. This is to say that that grime artist, why? Because he's a musician? Because he's a young black man? Because he might not be rich? Is that why he has no credibility? No, he has credibility. He is somebody from that community, somebody credible. A fireman who risked his life has told him that they have taken over 200 bodies out of that building. these firemen might want that to come out. That's why they're telling reliable people on the ground. This is a very solid source. And the other one is that somebody I spoke to who's been on the ground, who's lived there for many, many years, has told me that he believes the minimum figure will be over 200. Again, I say that is not confirmed, and I think that that is the number. At the very least, the same way from the first hour we were hearing 100 people dead, and that's gone up to 150, 200. What is the point of suffocating these communities and forcing them to be drip-fed information? If the government and the media and the local council is managing this crisis for the broader community because of the consequences it will have across the nation and how it will reverberate. So in other words, they're doing the same thing they did that led to this crisis, denying and ignoring the problems for mass management. That's not what is needed right now. These people have lost everything. They are real human beings. If you're in West London or if you're in London, there's a part of me that wants to say, please just go down and witness. But there is another part of me that thinks these are real human beings and they're not there to be spectacles. So I don't know where I lie on that matter. But for us who have been on the ground, we know how very real this is. And it is just as raw and just as uncoordinated as it was in the first hour. So I've talked a lot. I might quickly go through some questions. I'm sorry if it's been a ramble. As I said, please, somebody read through this, take out the key things and repost, re-edit. I don't know. I'm going to have to leave that for you guys. I'm running very, very, very late now as well. But just very quickly, I'm just getting up my page if possible to see if I can answer any of these questions. Sorry if you see a lot of mess around me, I'm halfway through packing. Rehan says, what is the solution going forward? Really and truthfully, right now, a grassroots movement of people, wherever you are in the country, need to put pressure so that this story continues to be headline news and is not allowed to just be taken off the agenda as this number of dead is drip fed to us over the next few months, and then in 2 months we are told the final number. That is why I've put this out, because that is what is needed. These are credible questions. I've come out to say it myself because without people coming out and saying, look, hey, we've got the expertise, we've got the background in this, we know, don't fob us off as, do not fob us off as conspiracy theorists. No, that's nonsense, absolute nonsense. And I had a very long debate with a young journalist yesterday, and the bottom line of what I will say is this: there is the responsibility of the media and the authorities to find out the truth. When they do not do their jobs, and there is a small minority of people that come out with what we call conspiracy theory, what does it say about our society that conspiracy theorists are closer to the realities of the ground and the opinions of people on the ground? They are closer to reality than our own authorities. So you can't fob me off as a conspiracy theorist. That's nonsense. Yes, there is always a marginal few people that have loony bin theories on things, and I've talked about this before. Those theories have come out because of a complete breakdown of trust and a vacuum of information and truth that has led people to make conclusions, often wrong ones. So we are people who are experts in this arena. We are journalists, we are charity owners, we are activists, we are academics, we are medical staff, and we are on the ground and we are collating this information. It is very ad hoc. There is no management of this situation, but this is very clear. This is very clear what is happening. So what you can do is to talk about these figures, to talk about them sensibly, to be objective, to ask serious questions, to get in touch with your any MP, to raise the pressure. Social media, keep up the social media pressure. These are all things you can do. Not only disgusting, but also heartless and a disgrace. There should be our own media network that the people should put together. Ishmael Blagrove, I think you mean, should lead it. People like this on the community, people like this, pivotal people, you have to understand how much pressure they're under at the moment, and they're doing amazing work. But there is no structural management of this, and they are managing the situation on their own. And we, of course, will do anything we can to help them. Zarga says, I think 150 alive and the rest have lost their life in that horrible fire. The government is worse than a communist regime. They're allowed to cover up what suits them. To me personally, I'm just going to say something. I know people are using the word cover up, and we've had people that are very prominent using this word cover up, and we need people on the grassroots saying it. But also just bear in mind, if people on the ground are saying that, we can't tell them how to speak. But there are very serious questions at the moment, and I think we should just focus on what those questions are and getting answers. Putting out terminology like that sometimes can be a bit off-putting to get as many people as we want engaged in this as possible. I don't know if that makes sense. But he continues to say, so really, what, hundreds of people are magically in a room on the top floor waiting for rescue? This is not a fairy tale. We want this government to be held to account. And that's the other thing. Just look at the building. Just look at the building. But as I said, that was like, you know, the start of it, that you get to the ground there, you look at that building and you're like, okay, let me go and investigate. And then you investigate for several number of days. That's why I said that I'm not taking my camera down, because when you take the camera down, you're taking your camera down to create a snippet of a story and then tell it out quickly. No, this needed investigation, so it's taken me 4 days, but this is really what I've seen over that period of time. The police have just said that the number is 58 presumed dead. This includes the number of 30 already. Well, I'll have to go back to, I have to go and look at this. But if their terminology is 58 presumed dead, that is an outrageous statement as well. If you have 58 confirmed dead, say 58 confirmed dead, but you need to know what the numbers of the presumed dead are. You need to say that it's presumed. We know the presumed dead is a lot more than that. We know this. And as journalists on the ground, as I said, I went down primarily as somebody who is going to go and help and is going to go and understand the community, because I know that is what is needed in the long term. But there are journalists on the ground that can do what I did secondary. It was an automatic thing that happened while I was helping. I saw this woman crying. I hugged her. I said, what is it? She said, oh, my name is so-and-so. I live here. My best friend and her 2 kids were here. Oh, what's your name? My name is so-and-so. My 5 nephews were on this floor. If I had taken that job seriously, within the first 24 hours, I could have had a list of people who are looking for relatives, and they would have given me their details, and we would have known from that the number is more than 58. We would have known from that the number is 58, more than 58. So the question is, why is this not being done? This is a serious question. We're not making theories, we're not doing anything. We're saying we have a question, why is it not being answered? The council have never had to deal with this kind of incidents. No plan is being formulated for a disaster like this. The council are short-sighted. That is absolutely true, but I will go beyond that and say that this council has treated this community with contempt, not just for 4 days or 4 months, but for 4 years, for 4 decades. And they don't know how to engage with this community in any other way than how they're dealing with it. They probably think that the community should be grateful for what they're doing. They probably think they're doing enough. We cannot underestimate, that's why there is so much anger, the underlying belly of contempt that this council has treated these communities. That's clear when you go and speak to them. It's clear if you've been covering how this council has been treating this community with contempt over many years. This is not a new story. And what I don't understand is, if it's not a new story, why are we not going to the sources of the experts on this community to coordinate with officials to take the lead on this crisis? There is none of that happening. Ali's saying, why isn't a list of the residents being released along with a list of survivors? Again, this is correct, and the main thing that I want to say is, this is not to say that why is it not being released to the media? Why is it not released to the general public? What we're saying is that we can clearly see that if this is happening for some people, and we don't even have evidence that it is, but if it is happening for some people, we know that there are lots and lots of people on the ground who have not seen this list. That's what the protests from yesterday was for. So it is not to take this position that why is the media not telling us, and then we're hearing counter arguments saying, well, they're doing their jobs. No, we're saying that we can see a story unfolding that they're not doing their jobs. I've seen with my own eyes, no list, no information, family members standing around helplessly, not knowing, not in the hours after, but in the days after this incident. Again, more people asking about the list. I can't see the rest of the comments, so guys, please, anyway, I don't know how long I've been talking, but please, please, please do take what I've said on board. We need to maintain the pressure. I hope that it has helped somewhat. I spent as much time as I could down on the ground in the last 4 days doing what I believe to be what journalism should be in times like this, and this is what I am gathering, and I wish that that I had more time. I wish that I wasn't travelling. I wish that I had more resources and more to give, but I've done my best, and my thoughts and my wishes and my condolences continue to be with those on the ground who are suffering. They are really, really suffering. I think everyone, especially those who are being critical of what we're saying, to just think for a moment that the images you're seeing on the TV of that tower were real life, that was your home, and that 4 days on you have to look out your window and you have to see that every day, and you know your daughter, your mother, your father, your sibling was in that tower block, and you know that they died, you know that, but nobody has helped you, nobody has talked to you, nobody is doing anything for you, and all you have is to walk around that block, walk around and just look at that. We've all been so shocked by this image, but do we understand that there are hundreds of families who had to live through that, and they've been left literally on the streets to wander around, wander around helplessly, not knowing what to do, looking at the sight and knowing that their family members are in there and they've been given no support. This community is traumatised. This community is traumatised and is getting nothing from the richest borough. I hope that their deaths will not be in vain. We must not allow their deaths to be in vain. This is a very pivotal moment. This is such a pivotal moment. We have to understand that a lot, no, I can't say we, I have to say that community on the ground and those families have had to lose everything for us just to prick our ears and take a little bit of notice of what they've been saying for a very, very long time. Okay, that's me done. I probably will post again while I'm away, but the plan was to take a week off. But yes, do spread the word.